joining in. I'll start out with a brief introduction to Women Who Code. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Renu Rajani, Director with Women Who Code in Hyderabad chapter. Let me just begin with welcoming the speaker, Padma Parthasarathy here, and I will just quickly talk about some of the activities of Women Who Code and then get into the talk. So, Padma, welcome to you. And let me just talk about, for those of you who are new into Women Who Code events, we have a mission to inspire women to excel in technology careers. And our vision is a world where diverse women are better represented as engineers and tech leaders. We have a code of conduct and can be found on womenwhocode.com website. It's an inclusive community dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or support in our community, regardless of gender identity, expression, so sexual orientation, ability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, socioeconomic status, caste, creed, political affiliation, and or preferred programming languages. So we request our community members to adhere to this code of conduct. One can sign up for Women Who Code community Hyderabad by getting into womenwhocode.com, sign up and choose Hyderabad as a network. You can see the events posted here. Our event today, August 27, is designed for digital transformation with Padma Parthasarathy, Senior VP, Head of Consulting and Digital Transformation Services at Tech Mahindra. And you also see two other events listed here today. Pan India, we have started a Connect India 2021 event, which is running into 2 days, August 27 today. It ended at 3 p.m. And September 3rd, where I'm speaking in leadership session on September 3rd. So this is a 2-day event. VMware India actually sponsors Women Who Code as one of the founder members. And so this is the event is sponsored by them. We just concluded in June 10th, 11th, we concluded Connect 2021 worldwide by Women Who Code headquarters. Impact we want to create, upskill, cross-skill, bring women back to work, and support and mentor women in early technological careers. We have focus not only on technology, but technology, innovation, and leadership. So women leadership across the levels and tiers in the tech organizations. Various tracks, front-end, mobile, Python, blockchain, cloud, data science, etc. And one of the key things we do is to provide network opportunity with for members, hold panels, fireside chats, etc. So this is a tech leadership panel that we are having today with Padma. I just spoke about this, and let me and this as well. Women Who Code just became a 290,000 member community worldwide. It's not just a global community. Women Who Code resources can be accessed anywhere in the world. So we now switch over to Padma. I quickly introduced Padma, so many interests, and she just, apart from her role in Tech Mahindra, she has grown into ladder, and also design is a new thing she got into. She'll talk to us about that. And she's active in IIM Udaipur and many other organizations. Maybe when we get a chance into talking to her about her personal side, she may delve into that. So I want to get started asking Padma that design is an area actually dominated by men often, right? So, and it's a new emerging field, design for digital. How did you first of all get into it? So I will stop sharing, Padma, and you can get into it.
I just share my screen as well. And just make sure that you can this. Yes, so you were asking me about, first of all, actually, thank you so much, Renu, for hosting me today. You know, I love the concept of Women Who Code, even though it's been a long time since I've coded anything except on a spreadsheet. So I do continue to do that, and I do enjoy that, but yes, you know, it's been a long time since I've actually sat down and coded on a computer myself. But just to talk about design and how I got into this. So I just want to first explain and kind of disclaimer here. I am not an expert in design by any means. Okay, I've just got an interest in the subject that started fairly early, and then it's so inextricably linked with digital transformation now that obviously that interest has actually sparked into something a lot more now. And I'll start with basically telling you a little bit about how my interest in the design field was kindled. You're able to see my screen, right? Maybe I should yeah. So, yeah, so my interest actually started in the early 90s with this book called The Design of Everyday Things that I came across at that time. And this book really fascinated me because it kind of opened my eyes into how design is built into a lot of things that we take for granted every day. And it also talked about how good design is actually extremely intuitive, and it doesn't require people to actually explain to you or give you a user manual if the design is good. So for instance, it talks about how having a bar across the glass door instinctively tells you need to push it. While if you have a handle, instinctively you have to pull it. So things like that. So it starts with concepts like that. It goes into much more depth actually. And around the same time, I also read this other book called Imagination Engineering. Now, I come from a science management background. And I never really thought of myself as a very creative person. And those were kind of areas that, I was interested in, but I didn't know how you could actually hone those skills in someone who has never worked in that space before. And this book really taught me how you could kind of structure creativity. And that kind of fascinated me because it brought in this whole concept of engineering and creativity and imagination. So both these books were really what sparked my interest at that time. But probably where I started getting a lot more involved in this space, and let me cut to this time period. So this was in 2009, and Tech Mahindra had just done the acquisition of Satyam Computers, and I moved to Hyderabad to run the post-acquisition activity. And at that time, we had this very, very interesting team in Satyam that was a very strong engineering services and IoT team. And this team had conceptualized something quite unique and creative for Gatorade. So now Gatorade is this drink that is used to supplant the salts that you might lose as an athlete during training, right? So you exercise, you've lost certain salts through your sweat. It tries to replenish that. So what the team came up with was a design that said, let's actually analyze the sweat of the athlete, determine which salts are out of balance, and then create a customized drink that can make up those salts for the athlete. Excellent concept. The client loved it. They did test market it. And then after that, we didn't hear anything about it for many years. About 7 years later, probably, they actually launched this same concept, but in a very, very different way. The way we had designed it, you actually wore a sweatband, and then you took that sweatband to a dispenser, the Gatorade dispenser, you deposited your sweatband in there, it would get red, and then you waited while your drink was mixed for you, the customized drink. What Gatorade launched, they have something called the Sports Science Institute, and they worked with a company, a design firm called Smart Design, that helped them to design this slightly differently. So what they came up with, and so what we were doing was a tech-led solution. I want to use IoT, and this is how I'm going to do it. And what they did was design-led. And I'll tell you why that was different. So here you had a patch. So Gatorade would give you a patch that you could wear on your skin. So after you finish your exercise, you put that patch on your skin that had these micro pores on it, which would change color based on which salts were out of balance. You then had an app on your phone. The app would read the patch, and then it would tell you had to take a pod of Gatorade, and Gatorade had 3 or 4 different pods. You took one pod, depending on, it would tell you which color it was, and then you would add it to a fixed amount of water and drink that water to make up the salts. Now, in this case, obviously, it's probably not as accurate because it's got about 4 combinations you can work with in pods. But it is so much more friendly. You don't have to go to a machine. You don't have to part with something that might have your DNA in it. And you don't have to wait for this drink to be made for you. This is all under your control. You have a patch, yes, you have to pre-buy patches, you have to pre-buy pods, but everything else can be done anytime, anywhere by you. It's completely under your control. The app is there. You're not parting with anything of yours, etc. So this entire solution basically look at it from the concept of the user and how easy it should be for them. You don't mind sacrificing a little bit of that accuracy and say, I don't want 100% customized drink. I'm okay if it's 90%, but this one, I actually find this a lot more convenient to use, right? So this is really what the customer then launched. And we realized that what we had been doing was this tech-led solution. And around the same time in 2015, Tech Mahindra changed its tagline from connected world, connected solutions to connected world, connected experiences, as we realized that in the digital world, experience was very, very, it was critical actually to success in the digital world. And we realized that as an organization, we were more tuned to technology solutions than to design experiences. And that is when we went and acquired a set of firms. So between 2016 and 2019-20, we acquired these 4 firms. Pininfarina, which is a physical design firm which designs products, and in fact started off by designing cars like the Ferrari. They're most known for that, but they design various other things from smart cities kind of concepts to physical spaces, living spaces, even pens and yachts, all kinds of things. And then there were these 3 other, what we call digital agencies, BioBorn and MadPow, each with kind of slightly different capabilities. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we do with them. So this was, like I said, this whole kind of, opening our eyes to the concept here. Now, when just around the time when we were looking and talking to Bio Agency for an acquisition, we actually got an opportunity with British Airways. Now, British Airways had just selected us as a vendor. We hadn't started working with them as yet. And they announced a hackathon between the various vendors that they had. And the CIO told us, you need to come up in 10 days' time. We'll be doing a Shark Tank kind of concept. You have to come and present for 10 minutes your idea of the next generation app for British Airways. So in that 10 days time, we partnered with Bio, since we were working very closely with them prior to the acquisition. And for the first time, now this is only about 5 years ago, everyone now uses concepts of design thinking in digital today. But at that time, it was still fairly new. We happened to be the only vendor that went out and applied those concepts. So we went out and talked to passengers and asked them what they're looking for, what their pain points are. Most of the other vendors tended to actually ideate on their own and come there. So as a result of talking to passengers, we started identifying some things that were bothering them. So for instance, everyone said, I take maybe 50 flights and I'm always under the baggage limit. I'm maybe well under the baggage limit. But the one time I am over the baggage limit, the airline slaps this huge charge onto me. It's extremely unfair. So one of the first concepts we said was, why don't you give people a baggage credit and allow them to earn credits whenever they're under the baggage limit, and then use those credits to pay for excess baggage when they need to. So that was one of the concepts. And then we started looking at this area. So when you come to the digital design, you start looking at what is called persona and scenario. So this is the concept that comes from design thinking. So you have this concept of personas, which is people who fit into a similar kind of profile. So this could be, in the case of British Airways, a frequent traveler is the persona. And then you have a scenario. The scenario could be a flight is delayed. Now, the persona plus scenario is typically what you start looking at in design thinking when you say, what is that experience you want to give them for this persona in this scenario? Now, we went one step further, and this is really Bio's thinking, where they said, the persona and scenario not enough, you would have something which determines behavior, which is your characteristics. Now, I might be a frequent flyer with the flight delay, and Renu could be another frequent flyer with the flight delay. My characteristics may be such that I get very agitated and unhappy about having to change my meetings, whereas Renu might sit back and relax and say, okay, great time to catch up with my reading now at the airport. right? So two very, very different behaviors from people who have similar personas, frequent traveler, and a similar scenario, but basically our characteristics are determining something very different. So this is, where you can also then look at it a slightly different way. You say, it's okay, persona, scenario, characteristic, determine behavior. Now, most organizations want to drive you to a certain behavior, to purchase their products, to use their services. Now, understanding your characteristics can be design and your persona, can they actually design a scenario that would drive that behavior? So that is really what we were looking at, okay? And this is the concept that Bio came up with. It basically said that um, this, I mean, the early days of market segmentation, et cetera, people went through a market segmenting customers into various profiles. So Asian woman would probably be a market segment. Persona is, like I said, frequent traveler. Persona plus scenario I talked about, which is what happens in that particular moment of time, how do you react? But how I react is really about understanding the characteristics of the individual. And once you do that, you can actually determine, how to drive behavior. So this is really, these are the concepts that we started to understand about digital design and how, it's not just the giving people some kind of nice front end, but it is also understanding the person behind and designing something personalized to them. Yeah, I'm going to pause here if there are any, Renu, if you want to.
So, Padma, I do have questions, and it's so interesting and exciting, really. And by the way, my own area of PhD research has been in services supply chain, and service redesign happens to be one of the key aspects, and that is where this question for me comes. You talk about digital design for digital transformation, and often people think that it's about product design, and a lot of experiences you shared were around services design. So in your whole digital transformation that you're talking about and design relating to it, do you see difference between product and services design for digital?
Yes, I think that all of these are actually embedded into design. So it's not just like you said, service design is extremely important. And maybe I'll give you this example of what we did for a customer called Scotiabank. So Scotiabank is one of the largest banks in Canada. They're also a global bank present in many countries around the world. They were looking at changing the mortgage experience. Now, any of us who's taken a house loan knows how painful it is to go through the process of getting a loan for a house, right? There's a lot of paperwork to be done, a lot of actually checks and things, credentials and things that are checked about you. During that whole process, you don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know how many more steps there are. And you also, if you found the house that you want to buy, sometimes, you have to let it go because this whole process has not happened quickly enough. So Scotia said, usually all of these are designed by the bank saying, I need all this KYC information about you, I have to manage my risk, etc. They're not really looking at it from your perspective as a home buyer, saying, what does Padma need when she wants to buy a house? So this is really what we, with Bio were able to do for Scotiabank, where we said, how can you enable up to a $2 million loan to be granted in less than 30 minutes? Now, to do that, obviously, you have to have a front end which allows you to enter all the information, upload documents, all of those things, and maybe the other bells and whistles. We said, we also have to be able to tell, the customer not just how much of a loan they can get, but maybe even show them what kind of houses they can buy with that budget, etc. If they're a first-time buyer. If they're a second-time buyer, then make the process of shifting more easy for them. So give them a few more services around that. Just to enable this loan to happen in 30 minutes. Now, it's not just the front end, right? There's a whole lot of things that you have to do behind, which is, the people that are going to be processing that loan, have they been geared up to do this? Can you automate so that there's less dependence on the individuals, so that you're using new processes, you're using new technology to be able to do it? Can you make all the connections into backend systems, verification, all that happen within this 30-minute time frame? So like you said, Renu, it's not just the front end. There's this whole aspect behind which needs to enable that service, which is the process, the technology, the people, etc., that also need to change. So, when you're thinking about design and digital, you have to think about it holistically through all of these concepts as well. I'm going to now go to another concept, which is slightly different. So I talked about, the online mortgage experience, but what if you have to combine this whole physical and digital? It is a little like the Gatorade, but this one is probably a product that all of us associate with a lot of sentiment, right? Going to a cafe to have a coffee is something that all of us associate with relaxation, that whole aroma, the whole experience. Now, Pininfarina was given the problem statement saying, how can you create a cafe or barista-like experience with a self-service machine? So what they designed was finally this. And they decided to look at what they call the multi-sense experience. So all of us associate the aroma, the sounds that come up when somebody is brewing your coffee, all of that, which the machine actually probably doesn't need to produce since there is no human doing those things. But they realized that to create that experience, you have to give all of that. So they even employed things like Hollywood sound artists to make those sounds. They an aroma around the machine. So they had pods that were releasing scent around the machine of coffee so that people were drawn to it. And then the more, I think, core aspects, which is how do you enable a machine which is outside to be accessed and accessible by people with different abilities, different heights? How do you also make this that could be out in the open somewhere? So they had to incorporate all of that as well into the design. Now, what did this enable? So suddenly Costa Coffee, which was using the store concept and the cafe concept, was able to create a new business model where they could put these self-service machines in airports, in offices, etc., and generate revenue without having to have the real estate and the cafe and the people there. Probably had to just service this machine regularly, but the rest of it was being done self-service. So it's also enabling very, very new business models as a result of this whole digital experience and design. Yeah. So I'm going to then move into, to kind of do a little bit of recap about what we've talked about here. So we've got the physical products that we started with, I talked about how when you use a door, for instance, how design is built into how you use it. And then we talked about digital products, digital services. We talked about service design, which needs to be incorporated into that whole change that you're doing. We talked about blending physical and digital. And now obviously the logical question to ask then is, what can you do beyond products? So Renu, again, if there is any specific interest area, I could go into that. Otherwise, I can probably talk about.
So I'm very interested, and we do have time, Padma. So I'm interested. What is this beyond product?
Okay. So let me talk about that. It actually combines two areas that are kind of great interest to me. So sustainability is a big passion of mine. It's a huge area of interest for me. And the other one, which is of course design, which we've been talking about now. So when we look at how design, and let's look at all of this evolution that we talked about, which is the product design, service design, etc., and how it applies in this concept. So maybe slightly different products. And if you look at the chair behind me, it's very similar to what you see in the picture here. So this is the Aeron chair, as it's called, designed, I think, in 1992, about 30 years ago, by Bill Stumpf and Don Chadwick. I mean, they work for the Herman Miller Company. But what they were looking for is an ergonomic chair that is comfortable to sit in, which of course this is because it adjusts a lot of things to fit to your, body, etc. And right from the backrest to the armrest to the height, etc., can all be adjusted. But more importantly, it is also a very eco-friendly chair. So for instance, you see this mesh kind of material. It is not a solid plastic or something like that. So it uses much less material. It does use materials like aluminum, steel, etc. But it's using a minimum amount of things like foam and things which are not recyclable. So they tried to make this a 90% recyclable chair. So great in terms of design and usage, but also great in terms of its impact on the environment. Going from that, now if we get into this whole product service design, the next one I'm going to talk about, again in the sustainability context, is what the Dutch railways have done. And for most of us, having public transport is one thing, but the last mile connectivity is always an issue, right? So how do you make that last mile connectivity also with much, much less of a carbon footprint? And so this is where the Dutch Railways actually created this whole OV bags concept. It's actually called OV Fiets, which and it's bike in Dutch. So the same card that you use for travel in the railways can also be used to access the bikes. And you have an app which tells you the location of the bicycles and where you can drop them off, etc. So you know exactly what you're going to do. As soon as you get to your destination, you can pick up a bike and then cycle. And of course, in the Netherlands, cycling is extremely common. So this really made sense for that whole environment of a nation that wants to be green and also it has a passion for cycling. So this saves the Netherlands about 800,000 tons of carbon emissions each year because of this concept. And then finally, when we come to the business model side, there is an organization called Peerby, which was started by a person called Dan Wedderpool. Now, Dan Wedderpool, I think about 2009, he had a fire and he lost all his belongings and his entire house in the fire. And when he told people that he needed help, he was surprised at how many people actually pitched in to help him. And this is not just his friends, but a whole network of people, friends, etc., who all came forward to help him. And he realized the power of this. So a couple of years later, he created this platform called Peerby, which basically says it allows people to share their goods with each other. Again, highly environment friendly because it allows people to reuse things that they're not and give things that they're not using to other people to use, etc. It started off being completely free. Now it also allows some concepts of payment, but again, very, very minimal payment for use of services. So if you look at it, 2011, 10 years ago, this was there. Concepts like OLX, etc., have come since then. But this one allows all kinds of products and services to be shared by people. And in fact, when they went in for funding, they also did a crowdfunding. So all of their customers pitched in to fund the company when it needed it. So this is another concept. And then finally, of course, when you look at a design which involves a much, much more complex thing like a city and mobility in a city. So these are the concepts that the Adaptive City Mobility Consortium in Germany has come up with. Similar concepts are being applied even in the National Capital Region, for instance, which is basically this says, can you have emission-free mobility in cities? So you have this concept of a lightweight vehicle that can be used for people, a battery that is quickly swappable, chargeable, etc., and put back, because most people don't have the time, to pick up something
actually,
and use it.
I don't know if it is a problem at my end. In between, sometimes you're cracking, and just now it cracked a bit more.
I'm sorry. This could be because it's raining here. So
okay.
Is this better now?
Yeah, and you go perfectly fine, but in between it just the voice comes like singing and very
okay,
slow.
I'm sorry.
So now it is good. Thank you so much.
All right.
So what I do is I generally put myself on the wired connection because videos get very intensive. So yeah, go ahead. We can hear you very well now. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, this concept of creating this ecosystem of the vehicle, the battery systems for charging, an app that allows people to see where they are. Now these concepts have started coming up in India also, and usually it's associated with two-wheelers, but this is something now that many cities are considering, where it's not just a single product or service, it's an ecosystem that you have to design, where the city and various mobility players, charging stations, public all come together to make it work.
So I have a question here, a bit curious.
Sure.
So your examples on sustainability run from a chair to cycle to mobile phone to car, wide variety. Between product and service design sustainability, what are the key aspects do you look for? What do you call as sustainable? What are the key ingredients of sustainability?
So actually, so there's the term called ESG that is now being associated very closely with sustainability, right? So E stands for environment, S for social, and G for governance. So essentially what you're saying is, how can you minimize your impact on the environment as much as possible? How can you uplift society as you're doing all the things that you're doing, so that you're not benefiting one group of people over another? And finally, how do you bring in that integrity and governance and controls to make sure that it is fair and equitable for all? So in my mind, I really think ESG says it extremely well. How do we actually use products and services that can minimize our impact on the environment, leave a greener planet for those coming after us, and also uplift as many people around us as we can?
Okay.
So this comes into the realm of, probably when you get into things like design thinking, it comes into the realm of what is called wicked problems. Problems that are highly complex, have lots of moving parts, and then you're trying to get it all to fit together and come up with a solution that matches all of that within the constraints that you've set.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm going to go to one last piece, which is how much time do we have?
Actually, you have time. You have time. Take it easy, Padma. You have time.
So when it comes to design, the other thing that we have to understand is also about human behavior, right? We talked about that at the beginning. But sometime ago, I remember reading probably 7-8 years ago about an NGO that had built toilets in Punjab, I think it was. Because women had to go out into the fields, etc., so they built these toilets in various villages. A couple of years later, when they came back to the villages, they found that the toilets were not being used as toilets. They were being used to store grain, to keep animals, but they weren't being used as toilets. And when they went and then they started asking why it was not being used, and they realized that for the women, going out into the fields with their friends was actually a social experience. They got a chance to go out and chat and gossip with their friends, which was, probably not there when they had to go into the toilet and be the only person there. Maybe in a patriarchal society where, their time at home was obviously monitored, and, their ability to go out and talk to others was fairly limited. This was giving them an opportunity to do it. So the people who had designed these toilets hadn't thought about that aspect. So a lot of times we have to start understanding who it is that we're doing, and maybe immerse ourselves in that environment for us to be able to design correctly. So yes, we are social beings. We like to play. And I'd like to maybe just play this video that shows how this concept was very well understood by that did this. Let me let the video and the audio kind of speak for themselves.
India's midday meal scheme feeds millions of hungry school children every day. But eating with unclean hands spreads disease like diarrhea. So it's important that children wash their hands with soap. Access to soap is easy. Unfortunately, old and heavy hand-operated pumps are the only way to draw water in rural schools, and kids find them impossible to operate. Our challenge was to make these hand pumps easier to use. Introducing
Padma, voice is not audible actually. I don't know if there's a voice in it.
There was. I'm sorry. Okay, it was not audible. I don't know whether I have to. 1 moment.
Initially, it was audible when they started talking
was
about
initially, okay.
solution. When they started talking about solution and that seesaw, and then there
Okay,
was.
then it was just music after that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, basically, I think they use this concept that children, obviously the hand pump is difficult for children to operate. It's high, it's hard, etc. But just this concept of bringing in element, making it easy, change the behavior then into them being very eager to go in and wash their hands there. Right? So this was actually done by Lifebuoy. So Lifebuoy sponsored this whole the program. But yes, any organization that is looking to make change like that probably has to understand the design concepts, or at least the design thinking concepts when they're doing that. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to take questions or any discussion that you'd like to do.
Yeah, so Padma, I have a couple of more questions. That's more about, more of personality side as well, right? So you are, like I started out saying, you are in design and, don't find design very adaptable for women often. And you gave an example, and I, coming from North India, I can very much relate to it. Actually, I come from agricultural roots, and I know how the women go and use the toilet, like they go together. I would find it very awkward when a woman has to use the toilet alone, and it is not a kind of a community place where a couple of others can stand and guard and watch. So I could relate to it. So do you also come across some prevailing stereotypes in the world of product and service design? And what impact
Absolutely.
it has on consumer, right?
Yeah,
It
so
has to be acceptable to consumer.
Yes, absolutely. There are multiple examples, Renu. So for instance, when cars were designed, so seat belts, I think, became compulsory, 50, 60 years ago. And seat belts have been designed actually based on dummies that are used for crash testing. Now, those dummies are all male and typically the size of a white male, right? So the height, the size, the shape, etc., is all of a male. So what has happened is that they found that about up to 50% of women could die in car crashes because those seat belts were not designed for the woman's body, because we are shorter, or we're typically shorter rather, and our shapes are different. Especially for pregnant women, they tend to be obviously of a very, very different shape. So things like seat belts may not work that well for them. And even when you look at, airbags coming out, because the height of the driver's seat, etc., was again designed for the male body, women tend to push their seats forward, which means that they get more of an impact when there is a car crash. So all of those things means that the stereotype was that it is typically men who drive, and most I think automobile companies did not really take into consideration the fact that there will be a number of women either riding in the car or actually driving themselves, and therefore that design it's quite dangerous actually. Another typical one is the design of life vests, is the design of bulletproof vests. So bulletproof vests are typically designed again for the male body. And again, for the white male body, not so much for the Asian males either, who again tend to be of a different shape and height, etc. And for women, I believe it is extremely uncomfortable to wear a bulletproof vest because you have breast coming in the way, etc. It's not very comfortable. So quite often they tend to maybe take it off and then put themselves in danger because they've got a product that is not built for them. Another classic example was a couple of years ago. I'm just getting a message that my connection is not that good. A couple of years ago, the International Space Station wanted to do an all-woman maneuver on the, on the International Space Station, get, I think, 3 women to go out and repair something outside together. They had to call it off. They had to postpone it by a couple of weeks because they didn't have enough spacesuits for women. Now, that actually sends all kinds of alarm bells ringing in my head, because that means they hadn't catered to that many women on the International Space Station. Now, God forbid, if something had happened and they, had to have a group of people that went out together, women would not have been able to do that and would probably have been at risk, maybe. So those are the things that actually can affect product and service design. There are multiple other examples of how things like even surgical instruments are not really designed with women in mind. A lot of heavy equipment is not designed for grips that women can use. So while women do use those products, they find that that they have not been designed for them. So these are all the things. These are the stereotypes that have come from the regular world into the world of product and service design.
Hey, thanks, Padma. Really like that and can very much relate to it. My last question before I come to the audience for interaction and network is about, do you come across any gender stereotypes today, even today in IT industry at work? And what are you doing to address it? Right. So,
yeah. The IT industry has definitely changed. When I started, we were very few. I was very fortunate to have as my first company one that was extremely friendly to women working there. And I kind of extrapolated that and assumed that the rest of the IT industry would be like that. And of course, found to my dismay that it wasn't. But yes, there are stereotypes. So let me give you some examples. And this is, again, I think McKinsey had done a series of videos. And one of the examples was this. Typically, when there is a meeting going on, the women are the ones that are asked to take notes, right? So whoever is the woman there, you do a great job of taking the minutes. Why don't you do it? And I'm sure every woman on the listening here would relate to that. Now, that is a very gender biased remark to make. I mean, the men are absolutely capable of taking minutes themselves. So once I realized this, so in my meetings, I ran this video, played it. In my next level, there is one woman who, again, will typically get asked to take the notes. So I told the men that from next time, I don't want her to be taking any minutes. One of you will be taking the minutes from here on. And I think the message then hit home, because they're all doing it unconsciously. It's not that they're doing it deliberately, but there is this concept in their minds. The second thing, and I think, again, this is something that has come in the news because an organization actually got sued for this. When there's a cake cutting in the office, the women will be asked to cut the cake after the, whoever birthday it is, etc. And they're expected, I mean, even if it's not stated, to kind of serve it around. Why should women be asked to do that? Women don't have to be in a position to serve things to the men, right? So these are all things that we do unconsciously, but they set some expectations which we have to be very careful about. And the last example I'd like to give, actually, and again, I'm sure every woman listening here will relate to this. Let's say that you are one or two women in a group of like 10 or 20 men in a room, which is quite common in the IT industry. And there is some point being discussed. You make a point. Nobody listens to it. 2 minutes later, a man will make the same point. And then they listen to it and say, great. And you're like, didn't hear me. And this has happened to many, many women across the world in many forums. And I think the way that you can address this, and this lesson I got from reading about the Obama administration. So the Obama administration, for a change, had a lot more women. And this was a set of women who obviously were participating in meetings with bureaucrats, with people from the military services, etc. A lot more men, and men used to a lot of power and control. And they encountered this thing. So they found a great way of addressing this. The women actually ganged up. There were enough of them that they could gang up. And every time a woman made a point that they felt was not being heard, the other women would say, look, listen to her. She's made a great point. I think we should address that. So they just brought in enough actually power behind what each person said to make sure that the voice was heard. And I think that's extremely important for us to do, to make the way easier for the women who are working with us.
So it looks like that has to start with, and I think it is a lot happening, at least in Indian society, where mom-in-laws are more listening to the daughter-in-laws. Chalo, let's make the food that she wants. Let us hear her more, hear more of daughters, not just of sons. So I think that stereotype will hopefully get addressed with the way things are changing. Let me come to an end of discussion and just leave the floor open for audience. But before I do that, Padma's contact is padma.parthasarathy at techmahindra.com in case anybody wants to reach. And I also just want to announce in the next few minutes, we will go live. We have a session on September 10th with Darshana Pai. I brought her in on this call to have experienced this particular session we are doing with Padma. So Darshana is there on the call as well, and I request her also to participate in the discussion and network. And her session will be announced in next few minutes, and you can sign up for it on womenwhocode.com Hyderabad chapter. And this is her session, and this is a very apt topic we are going live with very soon. Joint discussion on low code, no code, and she's an expert and authority on this area. I just wanted to announce that. And that's it. So these are the sessions we have done until recently in Women Who Code. So Padma is speaking today. We had Vani Gopalan speak a couple of weeks back. Anu and Amadapalli, before that, Nivedita Agarwal, Ramadevi Lanka. So we have had good lineup of speakers. We are a growing community. We just crossed 800 mark in Hyderabad. So thank you for all that you all are doing as a community to support this. And we would soon be launching a career returnship program for women in technology. So thanks for all the support, Padma. So over to all of you. The floor is open for questions to Padma.
Thanks, Renu and Padma. Can I ask question now, Renu?
Yeah, please.
Good. It's very interesting discussion, Renu and Padma. Extremely exciting. My question to Padma is like the product design and human-centric design thinking and all. If it is a top-down approach, initially the lean portfolio or solution team, then finally it has to go to the agile teams, because I come from an agile background, agile teams. I deal with the normal agile teams, normal agile team members. But how effectively, if you look at the human-centric design and design thinking aspects, the normal testers and developers, how they can internalize, how they can assimilate, how they can, because ultimately they are the people, right? They are the creators. I may be a vice president or a director. I may be good at design thinking, but ultimately I don't do coding. It goes to my team members. So ultimately in the team members, normal people, they may not be great in product market strategy and who are using my products. They may not be thinking. Always they're thinking at, my software, my piece, my user story, completed today or tomorrow. That is what is their thinking normally. Can you, based on your expertise, Padma, effectively couple of things, how we can slowly take these things, very important aspects, what you said, how do we effectively take them to the normal developers, agile team members?
Sure. So actually, the whole concept of agile also, Srinagesh, is that it is iterative, right? So it's not like the design team finishes and then the code is start, etc. They're all part of the same team, and the designers will keep giving inputs to the development team and vice versa. So that's the first part where I think they will be part of a team. It's not, in the past we used to have things like requirements finish, it then goes to development. It's not like that anymore. So that's the first part. The second is, and whenever you look at design thinking, it also includes prototyping and testing of the prototype. So there is a development element built into the design itself. You test whatever you've done to make sure it works. The second aspect is all of us actually are users. The great thing that I think digital has done is given all of us things like smartphones in our hands and access to the internet, etc. We have got used to the experience. When the iPhone first came out in 2007, I think it was, or 2006, the concept of a touchscreen on a mobile phone was completely new. Within 6 months, we expected it of every smartphone. We want the touchscreen. All of us get used to good experience. It's like having a map linked to any kind of direction app now, or even things like a cab booking app. That's now become standard. We expect it. We expect to be able to have a Google Map kind of experience in any of these applications now, right? So all of us then now have, since we start expecting this kind of design, even those of us who are probably not otherwise exposed to an end consumer, etc., will start thinking about how to apply design when we're coding. So in the past, you had this concept that you were far removed from the user, right? You had a customer sitting somewhere in the west coast of the US, and you were trying to imagine their life. Not anymore. Today, we had, in fact, I think one of our telecom customers, the CIO, was coming to us and saying, I believe, we were asking them, one of the developers from our team was asking her, saying, why does it take you guys 2 days to provision a new mobile connection? In India, it happens in half an hour. Right? So we are actually getting a much better experience here than in the West these days.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Padma. Makes sense.
Anyone else?
We do have advantage of being late starter often, right? So if you're not present, and when you kickstart something from, being late in life cycle, you have ability to innovate more. Right.
And you also get, you adopt the latest rather than having the legacy of the old.
Right. So Padma, one thing I may ask, because I'm still waiting for more people to ask questions, but I did not formally introduce you, right? So it'll be nice to tell a bit more about yourself. What all do you do apart from Tech Mahindra? I saw a lot of great interest in design. Some, your interest in various forums, and I am Udaipur, and also if you would tell us a little bit about yourself. And Darshana, you are there online. If you may want to interact with the audience, we have your talk upcoming on September 10th. So those are the things I have in mind. So go ahead, Padma.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town. I grew up next to the sea. I grew up in Goa. So everyone, of course, associates Goa with a lot of the fun stuff, which we definitely had. But I think growing up in places like that gives you this probably more of a patient outlook on life, hopefully. My husband may not agree, but yes. So that was the first thing. And my first exposure when I went to a city like Bombay was, the fact that I didn't know anybody in the city. In Goa, I was used to getting onto a bus and knowing half the people sitting there, etc. But I think you start getting used to these different aspects of the world as you travel. And I'm very lucky that my job took me to many places around the world, and I had this exposure to different cultures. I love to read. So it was nice to also match what I'd been reading about with what I was experiencing on the ground in various parts of the world. And like I said, the interest in design came because of these books that I got. And, I started observing how design was manifesting itself in various products and services as we use them. And how nice it is to see products with good design, because you don't even realize that they're such good design. It's just so much part of the whole thing. My interest in sustainability also started around the same time. So let me tell you where I got those books from. I went to the US on a project with a company called Bantam Doubleday Dell. So this was in the early 90s. And when I was there, Bantam Doubleday Dell, as you probably know, is the publishing firm. And when I worked there, they had these cupboards on every floor where you could go and pick up books that you wanted to read. And one of the people who saw this group of Indians, we would go and pick up books to read, he said, come into my room. And he happened to be from sales. And he had these books that they were using for promotions and stuff. And he had the extra ones. And he said, you can take any book from here that you want. So I got actually 2 or 3 of these fantastic books. And one of them was this book called Ishmael by a man called Daniel Quinn. And Ishmael actually explains the concepts of sustainability. So 30 years ago, this was obviously completely new. While we knew some concepts of sustainability, reuse and things, it is part of, I guess, the Indian DNA, right? We never threw out boxes that came into the house or bottles, etc. We would always reuse. So all of those things were ingrained with us. But why we were doing it was sometimes probably not as clear. Once I started reading Ishmael talks about it in a whole kind of, it's basically a gorilla teaching a human in the book. So the human's asking questions, or the gorilla's asking the human questions and helping the human to find answers. But a lot of concepts around sustainability came to me through that book, and that's how I got interested in the subject. And I'm glad that I've been able to keep that and apply very little, unfortunately, but yes, apply as much as I can to my life now.
That's wonderful, Padma. I would request participants to have any questions for Padma.
Yeah,
So
Padma,
Renu,
I'm sorry. I would just like to ask you.
Go
You
ahead,
have
go
been,
ahead.
yeah, you have been saying about creating designs which are intuitively acceptable to the customers or to the users. Uh, in that, there is one very important step, that is to find out the pain point of the user. If you could just give 1 or 2 tips on how to do that, sometimes gets a
You have
bit
to talk.
challenging.
Yes, so whenever you're designing something for a user, you have to talk to those users. You cannot assume that you know what they need. You have to talk to them, you have to ask them, and then you have this whole technique of open-ended questions, etc., where you're asking them things without an expectation of a response from them, which is this way or that way. So you have to be open to all of the cues that they're giving you. You have to obviously listen to a lot of what they're saying. So like in the British Airways example, all of us know that we have this problem with baggage credit, but to think that this should be solved in this particular fashion, I think that's then putting that problem and the solution together. So listening to the customers, passengers were telling us about things like, let us know in time when a flight is delayed so I don't leave my house. Let me know how long it's going to take me to get from where I am to the gate, because if I have only 10 minutes left before the gate closes, you need to tell me quickly how to get there. And sometimes the airport signs, etc., are very confusing. So can the app direct me, right? So so once you start talking to the passengers, you start getting these inputs. So any user you have to talk to. So even when you look at, say, the startups and applying things like lean, etc., to startups, they all tell you to start validating your product idea with customers as soon as possible, because otherwise you'll be developing something theoretical which maybe nobody has a use for.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks.
can I ask one more question, Renu or Padma, if there is nobody asking?
Oh, you can, and we can extend it also. So there is no hurry to wind up. Please.
Absolutely.
We are on a Friday and in a good mood to just go on.
Sure. Because this is very interesting topic. I want to thank sincerely Dr. Renu and Padma and all putting great effort. Design thinking and human-centric design, if we want to imbibe as a habit, as part of DNA of every team member, the UI, UX, because it looks to me a bit expensive, because design thinking experts are, leadership team members. If they have to do coaching or training, it's a bit expensive, I guess. But so my question to Padma is like, is it really top-down approach or bottom-up, or do you think every team member need to know UI, UX as part of these days latest apps we are developing?
It is useful to know. I don't think it's now not a question of top down, bottom up. I think it's quite circular these days, because what the developer is doing and what it's actually resulting in maybe gives the designer a slightly different idea, and they would come back and change things, etc. So it's a good circle that happens. And Agile, the whole concept of Agile is to empower every member of the team, right? So that they are empowered to speak up and talk, which is why you have the daily scrums, etc. So stand-up calls are supposed to give an opportunity to everyone and not have this hierarchy in teams anymore. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is not everyone needs to design screens, right? This UX is one part of it. And yes, it calls for some creativity, being able to use color, space, etc. Not all of us are good at that. But what we might be able to do after that is, once they've designed that part, in terms of translating it into a service design or a technology, because finally, like I said, even in that Scotia example, to enable that 30-minute mortgage to be granted for up to 2 million, etc., you need to know what systems at the back need to be connected. Where do you get all the credential checks happening? How do you do the KYC? All of that then has to happen. So as long as you're willing to, find solutions for what is desired by that end user, I think you'll be a good designer. It doesn't have to be only the creative front end aspect.
So that means at least one team member in a Scrum team need to know a little bit about UI UX. At least one guy.
If they're designing it.
And
Absolutely,
now
yeah.
Padma will object why it has to be a guy and not girl.
No, guy means both, Renu. Mine means one guy means both these days. Guy is a common.
No, guys,
So,
we are replacing the guys with with team.
No, but women, in fact, women includes men also, no? So you could use women as the term.
Sure. So yesterday I was I was reading this. Yesterday I was reading this all women piloting towards aeroplane and all Air India, all women crew. It was exciting. I mean, we're all same. Everybody can do all great things.
I'll tell you, Srinagesh, though, I think the use of the term is important. When I was a child, or not even child, when I was probably in my 20s, I used to think that he, she, and all it's like the crumbs of feminism. Those are not things we need to fight about. But as I've grown older, I've realized it's actually most important, because you're setting expectations in other people by the use of the gender. In your children, if you've got a daughter and you keep saying he as a person, she will think those things are excluded for her. If you refer to a doctor as a he, an engineer as a he, a designer as a he, she will think that those professions are not available to her. So you're setting a lot of expectations in other people, and especially younger people, through the use of the words that you do.
Sure, makes sense.
So,
makes sense.
A big change for me. I realized the bit a little late, I think. So I'm now trying to propagate that message as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. I have only one daughter, Shweta. I have only one daughter, Shweta.
No, one is enough. And Padma, at one time, I used to think when the first time I came across women-specific programs like Women in Technology, or call for this network for women, then I used to think, why are women different? My dad raised me like a child and not boy or girl, and why you need different treatment? And imagine that's the time when I had 2 kids, and this is how I used to think, that I'm able to travel, go around. I'm literally living in a suitcase. I'm not any different from men. And why there are programs for women? Are we smaller? Are we lesser? But then I realized that, because of so much damage having done to correct it, it is needed, right? Because otherwise, how do you provide a platform where it is necessary? So that recognition came to me later. But what I'm saying is the way I was raised, it was like, kuch nahi chahiye, women have everything. You have all the wherewithal to do what you need to do and all that. So the argument can go either way. So good one.
It's like, the car, right? So if we had a car where the seat is not right, you would think it is your problem. It is not the design of the car that is a problem. Now we realize that, we should expect that it should be designed for us also.
True. I see there are a couple of more folks, and if there are any questions, let's have one last one. And Darshana, pleasure to have you. Do you want to say a few words?
Hey, hi Renu and Padma. It was really nice listening to all of you. A lot of passion is reflected in entire discussion for sure, and really glad to be talking about software development future, low code, no code in the coming week, 2 weeks, right, Renu?
Yes, September 10th. Yes. So
September 10th. Yeah.
Looking forward to another.
Yeah. And this topic, I look after the delivery governance and corporate governance in what you saw, and this topic caught my attention a couple of quarters back. And always I think that when it comes to estimation, we put not less than 50% in the development as an effort. And if these platforms are coming up and if you have to really adopt, what's going to happen in the future? That is a big question. And is it really just a buzzword and hype, or there is some reality behind it? And it really caught my attention, and I started putting my time and efforts into understanding what this is all about. And I'll be glad to talk about my experiences and my take on this more than anything, because there's nothing right and wrong talking about many topics these days. It's your perspective and your take on what shape it is going to take up in future, probably. So we're looking forward to the interaction, Renu.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Yeah.
thanks, everyone. If any one last question, otherwise we will close it. So, Sumati, anything from you? Vindhya? So, by
Hi.
the way, Padma, Vindhya is into design. So, I see both mom and daughter are there. So, Vindhya, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Right now, my mom and I are not in the same city, so she's not right next to me. But thank you so much for your talk, first of all. Ms. Padma, I really enjoyed it. I'm also very interested and in the same field. I'm into user experience research and design thinking. I will also connect with you. More than a question, it is just a reflection that I wanted to share, which is very often like what you were also saying about seatbelts and women being excluded. A lot of minorities are not just minorities, women are 50% of the population, but like a lot of people are excluded quite often with design. Even if you look at left-handers, even if you look at people who are differently abled, you don't get like proper you don't have accessibility. I've been an architect, I've been also a teacher, so just thinking out loud for society as a whole. One thing that I find quite commonly that happens is people in power or people with the money sometimes dictate what happens, and it gets designed only for that majority. Say, for example, as an architect, I've noticed that the builder who has the money will say, no, let's not make a accessibility ramp. No, this is not required because, oh, no, let's not even put another window in this room where there could have been cross ventilation, simply because they want to cut down or save up on money or do something else. So there have been so many times I've noticed this, even work with the government. I was working on a project which was around saving water for Karnataka. So one of the things that happened was they were more interested in projecting or like showing that they're doing the work rather than actually doing the work. So a lot of times in this field, it's kind of I wonder what it takes to build a society that's more empathetic and to connect and to really do things that may not bring back economic value, because a lot of these design changes are not only about economic value, it's about like being inclusive for society. It's about doing a little extra thing. So it's just a thought around how to kind of reach the people with power and what it takes to build a society like that.
So
Padma will comment, but before that, I will just say that Vindhya, I kind of shirked my stereotype and did not look at you as the daughter to my friend, and I called you a designer, and you really are, right? So, and all that you described is spot on. If I have just one word of advice, I think you're on perfect direction. Just have a bit of patience and stay on with all the great ideas you have, because you will make a difference. If you just,
I would actually add, Vindhya, that let's look at that politician or somebody who's and I would have been like you, saying, why are these people getting in the way of something that needs to be done? But maybe now I would say they're also a persona that we have to deal with to build a solution that caters to their needs as well. So give them that platform for their respect, adulation, whatever it is, as long as you can get the work done as well.
and they may actually come to the support. That's the belief, right? Okay. Fatima, anything from you? I know you're there. I'm hoping you're looking forward to more networks. So anything from you?
Renu, I have a question too for Padma. Padma, I just wanted to ask you, how many big IT companies are investing in design thinking before they start a project? How much of user research is being done, and how much of human-centered design is being done on the bigger IT projects? What is the percentage of budget or time allotment that is being done? Any idea?
But I know that most of
some connection issue, Padma.
maybe I'll just go off video for a moment.
So,
Are you able to hear me?
yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. So what I
Padma,
was
maybe,
saying was
Padma,
that,
maybe just, Padma, if you just go off video, maybe at least your voice will be audible, because right now your video is frozen.
So I
So
guess
why?
you stop the video actually.
So no, Sumati, it was not
Yes,
for you because line of Padma is bad. So I was just requesting her, but you are audible as well as visible. Now Padma is there with the audio.
Yes, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So yeah, I probably can't give you a number offhand in terms of what budget is being set aside, but most of the large IT firms have made investments in acquiring design capability. Now, where is that design capability used? Initially, it used to be used for anything that had a front end. But now we are looking at even things like, even if you're looking at service management and support, you're saying, can you do a persona-based service there as well? Because the needs of different users for those services are also quite different. So the thinking has started. Whether it has percolated all the way down, I would say no. And do we use design thinking for every project we do? Not really. But we're hoping to get there soon.
Okay. Yeah, I think somebody strong like you who understands the importance of design thinking, such a person should be put in charge of development, because oftentimes what happens, we get into like maybe 50% of the project and then find out that it may not work for the end user as well as we thought.
So Sumati, my take on this would be that people like myself, Padma and all, mostly come from services industry. And say she's heading a department, let's say design or digital transformation or whatever it is, or say usability or UI, UX or CX, whatever it is, right? So those are the emerging areas of experience, customer experience or user experience. So we basically offer it as a service. Yes, we tell customer we offer this as a service. We show them examples, POCs, pilots, and what all we can do for customer, how we can make a difference. But basically there is nothing free and bundled in any service. We make a proposal or bid for whatever customer wants. If customer themselves say, okay, look, this is my budget and this is what I need, however much we feel they may need, we may pitch for it, but we will do basically, okay, I don't need it means, okay, I don't need it. I want to hire somebody else to do it, fine. I want to do it in-house, fine. So that's how services work. So we do have influence, but to a certain extent, not beyond a point, right? Because we are not the one running their organization, right? So we work more as a client partner.
So we can suggest. So yeah. So sometimes when we find that they're being asked to do something for an end customer, but there is no clear role for somebody who's defining what your customer experience strategy should be, etc., then we will suggest that you should have somebody on your side. If you don't have anyone, we can suggest a team, etc. And sometimes, yes, they take it, and like Renu says, it's really up to them.
Okay, all good things come to an end. Padma,
I just wanted to introduce Vasumati as well. Yes, I want to.
Yes.
So Vasumati is an old friend. She's her husband used to be my colleague in my first job, as I was saying, was one of the nicest places I worked in. Vasumati actually runs knowledge sharing platform. She's built that for the medical profession. So Vasumati, you should probably talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you could have Padma, you could have told me, I could have given her a platform when 20 people were there. But anyway, you're
that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'll tell you what I would really like to happen later on. So when it was Padma, it was great hearing it. Whatever you said, very interesting. I'm a librarian by training, and I'm running a not-for-profit where we teach anybody in the health profession, starting from students right up to seniors, how to do a structured and systematic online searching for all their information needs. And later when they write publications, how to use reference management tools and stuff like that. So very recently, in the last couple of years, we've managed to make our courses go online. And I'd like to introduce my colleague Fatima, who I introduced to this body thanks to this mail about Padma that my husband forwarded to me. She is also a librarian like I am, but accidentally or completely into the technology space. And she has single-handedly designed our foundations website as well as the e-learning website. So in fact, just very quickly to say this, today we were discussing about one senior doctor who had a problem giving a feedback form. He wrote to us yesterday that I'm unable to do this. Fatima had to spend 2 hours and then she figured out that he went and clicked a preview instead of answer the questions. So that we could relate to the user experience. Yeah, it was a plain UI thing. And then we were discussing, she said, I had to spend 2 hours figuring out what all he could think differently. So getting into news, I was just thinking of that at that time. I'm hoping specifically that Fatima would pick up a lot and hopefully one day, she's a very quiet person, quiet achiever, but I hope she presents here someday. That's my...
Sure. So Fatima and Basmati, do write to me.
Fatima said something. Okay.
Renu at womenwhocode.com. You can write to me. And
Fatima, you wanted to add something?
Happy to take it forward.
Even I am looking out to a platform to speak on.
Great,
very
wonderful,
good.
wonderful.
And your husband, you said he was here in the call, right? Until some time back.
No, he
that
wasn't.
was Sri Nagesh. Else.
Sri Ganesh was one of the founders of NASCOM. So he's been in the IT industry for a very long time and kind of seen the whole growth of the industry and spearheaded a lot of it.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Good.
Thank
so
you.
Looking forward, write to us and we will take it forward. And same is the case with Vindhya. She is wanting to speak in the forum as well on so much of design she does. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate. I'll stop the recording now. Closing and looking forward to you in the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.